Why do alcoholics drink in elevators? Because it lifts their spirits. Lifts the spirits. Spirit. Alcoholics. Don't know why I bother. Today we're talking about boredom. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bad Country. I hear people say they're bored in sobriety all the time, or that sobriety is boring, or that sober people are boring. And by sober people I mean me. People call me boring. And maybe they're right about that last one. I am, after all, an alcoholic a sober person who does nothing but talk about being an alcoholic. That's enough to bore anyone to drink. But I don't think the rest of it is true at all. I don't think sobriety is boring. Obviously, I'm biased. I would say that. It is very much the kind of thing someone like me would say. I'm not on a crusade, I'm not on a mission to get everybody in the world to quit drinking. But I am on some kind of crusade to tell people that sobriety is pretty good. And in the same way that it's said that interesting things only happen to people who know how to talk about them, that is to say, interesting things only happen to interesting people, I think the same is true of boredom. Boredom happens to boring people. And maybe that sounds unfair, but that's only because it is unfair, sorry. But I'll explain as we go along, I guess. So I don't believe that sobriety is boring, but I do believe that boredom is very dangerous. It's in the same kind of category as loneliness and disenfranchisement or depression, alienation, which is to say that boredom is not a minor issue. In recovery, boredom is an extremely important issue. It's not a minor thing. Boredom is not an afterthought. It is kind of central to the recovery process, is understanding boredom and having strategies for kind of chasing it away. In fact, boredom is serious enough that it is one of the very few topics that there is medical studies on which to draw. There is information, clinical information about the connection between boredom and addiction. Just in case you sometimes are tempted to think that I just run the camera and flap my gums about this stuff. No, I promise. I do read. For example, a 2023 study of students. Students are very often the subjects of studies like this, not because students are particularly susceptible to addiction, but because these kinds of very low budget studies are often done by PhD students, PhD candidates, and they're drawing their data from the community around them, which is largely students. But that study set out to set some benchmarks to define who and who is not susceptible to boredom and how that correlates to their substance use. And they determined, that study concluded that people who are more prone to boredom are 3.6 times more likely to develop substance use disorders, particularly cannabis and alcohol. Now, that study that I just showed you gets a little bit bogged down in definitions of who is prone to boredom versus who is susceptible to boredom, and all of that stuff doesn't really matter. The point is that there is a straight line between boredom and a compulsion towards substances. Boredom is a very, very strong indicator, predictor of substance use. And I'm glad that that's a medical study, but it doesn't exactly feel like new information, does it? I think most of us knew that either through experience or common sense. But there is now at least science to back up that feeling that we have. My own threshold for boredom is pretty high. I'm quite good with boredom. My own particular patterns of addiction involved things more like loneliness and isolation, self-destruction, depression, that kind of thing. And for people like me, it's not the presence of boredom that we experience. It's something more like the absence of chaos. Chaos for me for a very long time gave my life structure. The chaos that was a product of my drinking, in a strange way, gave my life not fulfillment, but a sense of completeness. It felt very full, if not fulfilling, because of the presence of the chaos that I was wreaking around me and in my life. Chaos is at least stimulating. It is at least kind of exciting, engaging. And in my drinking, I would often crash from one chaotic episode to the next. And as a result of that, instead of feeling out of control, it gave me a sense of control. Counterintuitively. It made me feel like I was managing somehow. When things were always happening, when there was a disaster every 5 minutes, and at least it made me feel like, I don't know, there was some structure to it. Gave me a sense that things were happening. I'll give you an example. Before I got sober, I fell into a relationship, a very intense and short one, and we drank very heavily together, and that relationship quickly disintegrated. But because it had been so intense, the relationship itself had been so chaotic, that everything else had suffered. So my rent was late. I was isolated. I isolated myself. The cops were called. I ended up on a psych ward. Bills were behind. My job, I nearly lost my job. And all of that, just a whole bunch of really terrible, chaotic things all at the same time. And that was a normal week in the life of me as a binge drinker. I would invite that chaos in. The chaos kind of filled the silence, I suppose. Because it gave me things to do and things to think about. It occupied my mind so that I didn't have to be left alone in the silence. My brain was just full of the chaos. And for a lot of us in alcoholism, I think that that's a pattern, is crashing from one terrible scenario to the next. It gives us a sense of momentum, of problems to be resolved. And if you're thinking about problems, then surely you must be okay if you have that capacity. The chaos for me chased out the dead air. It filled the empty space, when really what it was doing was making my life just unlivable, absolutely manic and exhausting. I was inviting it. I was doing it on purpose. I just didn't know that I was doing it. And then I quit drinking, and all that chaos went away, and I was left in my own company thinking, like, what now? What do I do next? What do I fill this new void with? In the long term, I kind of replaced the chaos and the resultant sense of boredom after the chaos had ended. I filled it with like work and exercise and this YouTube channel and other boring sober stuff. But for a long time, there was a lot of kind of listlessness, a lack of direction. And that listlessness and directionlessness can be a trapdoor to relapse. What else is an alcoholic going to do when they're left to their own devices, right? The devil makes work for idle livers. So that's what I experienced. It was the lack of chaos was experienced as boredom for me. But boredom can trigger a desire to drink, as it did with me many, many times. But also it can prevent someone from stopping drinking. The fear of boredom can keep people drinking for longer than they should, longer than they know they should. The fear of being bored is a major obstacle to some people. And I think like late stage alcoholics fall into a couple of, like two categories. The first category can't stand to be alone. They're so afraid to be in their own company with their own thoughts that they drink really, really heavily to numb the void, to prevent any kind of introspection. And the second group are those who drink to fill the space of unstructured time. Real boredom. Those are people who do genuinely drink from boredom. And that's also the reason why things like structure and routine becomes so important in recovery. By sticking to a routine or to a structure, there are fewer gaps through which boredom can enter. There's less room to be filled by boredom if you have a rough structure of your day. And that's much more like my profile. I looked forward to opportunities to be alone, and to, when my girlfriend was out of town, or after some big event where I had some downtime, I looked forward to those spaces to kind of lock the door, close the curtains, drink myself to oblivion for a week or two. Whereas people who drink because they don't like to be alone with their own thoughts, they might dread an evening on their own, and they might drink very heavily to block that out. Drink to deaden their own emotions so that you don't have to experience them. But either way, it's a very dangerous habit loop to get stuck in. Addiction specialists call this the hedonic treadmill, because what tends to happen after that kind of drinking pattern is that alcohol has completely hijacked your dopamine reward system until it's only stimulated by artificial means, by alcohol. Alcohol has completely corrupted your ability to feel reward and feel pleasure. And then when you remove the alcohol, everything can feel kind of dull. And I think for many people who believe that sobriety is dull, it's because that dullness, that deadening of our reward systems, is experienced as boredom. We don't have a better word than boredom for that state. It's not quite boredom, but I'm not going to nitpick. I'm not going to split hairs. It's, for intents and purposes, it's boredom. When life feels dull, and you spend so long believing that alcohol makes life feel good, it's such an easy resort. It's such an easy option to go back to drinking, just to stifle the boredom. Which isn't really boredom, it's just your reward system being flattened for a little while. It does recover in time, but for a while that boredom is pretty profound. It's quite powerful. And that's just one of those clever, pernicious ways in which alcohol just wants to take over every element of your entire life. It will make you feel bored and then tell you the answer is alcohol itself. It's like, I think I've talked about this before, but there was a new strain of gonorrhea discovered recently, which actively makes the host, the person who has it makes them horny. It makes them go and seek dangerous and reckless sexual encounters in order to propagate itself. And that's an incredibly intelligent, like almost literally intelligent biological fluke that a sexually transmitted disease or infection makes you want to have sex in order to transmit itself. That's what alcohol is like. That's how ingenious it is. That it will make you feel bored and then make itself the solution to your boredom. As much as I reject the idea that sobriety is any kind of sacrifice, I will admit that the kind of ritual of drinking and the social aspect of it, or the routine of it, does fill a space. It does fill empty space. Rituals like going to the pub with your friends, or a glass of wine after a tough week, or dating, that kind of thing. Those kinds of routines stave off the boredom, and alcohol is a large part of those. And it's difficult to break out of those cycles, especially if they're relatively moderate. If you don't see the alcoholism creeping in, like if you're a bottle of wine after work person and you don't see how much is mounting up. And then suddenly, if we remove the drink, we also have to remove the ritual too. And I'm sure many of you have quit smoking, right? And one of the weird things the weird urges that you have with smoking is not just the nicotine addiction, but it's also the ritual with smoking, even just putting your hands to your mouth. People chew pens after they've quit smoking for years, or because we usually smoke before and after we do a thing, anything, like before a journey or whatever. Once the cigarettes are gone, those rituals suddenly have to go too, and you notice their absence. And the same is true of alcohol. Going to the pub on a Sunday or whatever it is, suddenly it's not just the time that you spent drinking, it's also the time that you spend preparing to drink, or traveling to drink, or any of the ritual, like the associated rituals. Suddenly, like, you have double the amount of time to fill once you quit. And that time, it's not empty because there's nothing to do when you're sober. There's more to do when you're sober. It's empty because that learned behavior is missing. So the ritual of the glass of wine after work or the going to the pubs, those are learned behaviors. So boredom is most powerful in the very early stages of sobriety. And then generally there's like a pink cloud stage, and then boredom might return. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's more like a confluence of forces in this case. So things like post-acute withdrawal syndrome can feel like boredom. Pause comes with things like anhedonia, which I've been experiencing for quite a long time. And that includes like a lack of pleasure, which can feel the same as boredom. Parts of it feel like restlessness, but also no desire to do anything. It's very weird, and it makes you feel guilty about it as well. And a million other kind of medical reasons for why you might experience feelings as boredom in early sobriety. But more than anything, it's just that alcoholism just takes up so much fucking time. It's a full-time job to be an alcoholic. No days off. And it's not just the time that you spend drinking. It's also the time that you spend recovering. There comes a certain point in your life, I'm sorry to say this, if you're younger than 35 or so, there is a metabolic change in which drinking very, very heavily on a Friday night will cause you to lose the entire weekend. Those quick hangovers, they become 2-day hangovers. And then very quickly the hangover is spilling into the following week. You kind of forfeit your entire weekend. At a certain point, at a certain age, you forfeit the entire weekend if you drink heavily on a Friday night. If you get mashed on a Friday night, all of the plans that you had for Saturday are out the window. And you might even, it's pretty likely you'll be drinking again on the Saturday too. Just to make yourself feel better, then that will tip over into drunkenness. And then you can't do all of the plans that you had for Saturday because everything's closed on Sunday. And this is how alcohol is a thief of your time. When you're losing your weekends, your year is shorter. Not literally, but it feels shorter. You have less and less time. And then suddenly in sobriety, you get all of it back and you don't know what to do with it. You have so much time that you start doing stupid things like starting YouTube channels to talk about sobriety. And you don't quite know what to do with it all. And you get inertia, and then you feel bored, you know? And as I kind of mentioned in passing a moment ago, for me, boredom comes with guilt as well. I don't know why the people on this island remove the exhausts from their motorbikes. I'm not kidding. It's like a fashion here in this particular city to make the motorbike you're on as loud as possible. God, I'm old. What was I saying? So even if you're not a chronic alcoholic like I was, which was drinking every day to oblivion, even if you're only drinking at weekends, you're losing 20% of your year. And then you get it all back. You suddenly have more time on your hands than you know what to do with. And if you're anything like me, boredom comes with a sense of guilt about it, which is that you feel like you're supposed to be doing something, but you're not. And you feel like you're wasting time by being bored. And it's kind of a double whammy. And when I have empty time, I always feel under pressure to be doing something productive with it. like whatever it is, just something. It's very difficult for me to just sit quietly. It's the reason why I can't meditate. I'm just not Zen-minded. I read a very, very good book about Stoicism a couple of years ago. It's been very influential on me by a Stoic philosopher. And he made the point that he also tried Zen Buddhism, which I explored very briefly, but said it wasn't for him. He also he didn't have, some people just can't force themselves to be Zen. And I'm certainly one of those. My mind is not still. But it's not all doom and gloom. There is good news. There is some positivity, I think, to be found within boredom. Call me an optimist. I like to think that my glass is half full. Except, of course, now I'm sober, it's always empty. As big a risk as boredom is for relapse, I also think it is equally necessary. It is both, it is equal risk, but necessary. It's a necessary stage through which early sober people need to go. Need to get comfortable with boredom. And boredom is the first challenge that most of us will face in sobriety. It's the first test of our progress into sobriety. And so boredom is nothing. It's just nothing. It is not a challenge. And you have to be strong enough to be able to handle boredom, because far more challenging tests will inevitably come your way at some point. Boredom's easy. You can solve it by doing literally anything. Do anything at all, rather than nothing, and boredom will go away. And you have to be able to defeat boredom, because if you can't get over boredom, how are you going to handle like a real thing, like grief, which happens to all of us? So you have to let the boredom in a little bit. You have to be able to face being bored, because boredom's really nothing. Like, it's not a terminal disease. Being bored isn't going to kill you. You're not a dog. You can be bored without destroying the place. I treat boredom the same way that I treat urges to drink, which is by looking them in the eye, by meeting them head on. Look boredom in the eye and just be bored. It's not going to kill you. You have to be stronger than boredom. You have to be able to be bored and not reach for a drink. It's crucial for your long-term sobriety. And if that means that you have to be okay with being bored sometimes, then just fucking put up with it. It's nothing. It's not even a thing to complain about. I have completely invented something for myself to be angry about here. I'm sorry. And on that note, I'm pretty bored of this video. I'm sure you are too. So I won't make it longer than necessary by outlining any kind of here's how you defeat boredom, top 10, that kind of thing. If there is any interest in that, let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video on the Patreon or something. Go and subscribe to that. The link is in the description. But I'll throw it over to you. How do you handle boredom? What strategies have you developed to keep the boredom at bay? Thank you for watching. And as always, good luck out there.